Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online. Hi, if you're online. So whether you're in Bristol or you're far away, you can join in the conversation. So my name is Martin O'Leary. I'm the studio community lead here. I'm a white man in my 40s with long hair and a beard, wearing a brown jumper today. And every Friday, we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday, where we offer you the chance to spend some time in our space by hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So especially a big welcome to anyone who's new to the studio. Can anyone who's new to the studio put your hand up? Okay, we've got a few today. Welcome, this bit is for you. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. And we're a partnership between Watershed, where we are right now, UE Bristol at the University of Bristol, and we're funded by Arts Council England. And what we do is we offer studio space, desks, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all for free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And most of all, we're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make some time for collaboration. So just before we begin, a few quick notes. Please do feel free to move around. There's a kitchen back there. You can grab a cup of tea or coffee or a glass of water. We have a quiet space just next to this space, so on my left, your right, just around the corner there. There's a little room, it's got some sofas and bean bags, fairly well soundproofed. If you need to take a break at any point, you can just pop in there. We are not expecting a fire drill today. If you hear a fire alarm, it's probably real. So if you hear that fire alarm, the studio team will direct you towards the fire exits, but in any event, they are at the other end of the studio, again, my left, your right, and at either end. And then there are accessible toilets and baby change in the corridor over there next to the kitchen. There'll be a Q&A at the end of this talk. Those of you who are watching online, please pop your questions into the YouTube chat. Loughton will be your voice in the room today. If you're in the building, then just raise your hand and we'll send around a microphone so that the folks at home can hear what you're saying. You can get news on all of our future talks, and we actually have quite a lot of future talks on the website right now. You can head to watershed.co.uk/studio. At Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, at pmstudiouk.bsky.social on Blue Sky, or at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. If you are following us on Twitter, we are not on Twitter anymore, or X, or whatever you want to call it, for what should be fairly obvious reasons. So please find a better place to get your information from, both for us and in general. Anyway, our speaker for today is Greg Ryan. Greg is an award-winning creative facilitator, composer, multi-instrumentalist, and studio resident. For the last 10 years, he's been designing products as part of immersive collaborative projects with young people. And today he's going to talk about the best practices and common pitfalls of co-design through reflections and case studies on some successful and not so successful past projects. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Greg.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. And hello, everyone online as well. My name is Greg, as has already been said. I'm a musician and a composer, but I also work with Pika. So that's why I'm here today to talk as a member of Pika. We're residents here. We've recently completed some work with Pervasive Media Studio that I'll talk a little bit about later. So Pika is, that first obvious question, what is Pika? Pika is a collective of multidisciplinary artists, primarily working in sound. So we are all musicians. So I'm a musician, everyone else that works with Pika is a musician. But we're also aware that sound can quite often be boxed into very small areas, primarily things like what people would call conventional music learning, and be very skill focused. And we want people to experience worlds of sound wherever they are in the world and whatever kind of level they're at and engaging with it. So sound can be a really, really powerful way, in our opinion, of engaging people with sound. In fact, we go one step further. We say that sound can be a world builder. I'll talk a bit more about that too. But Pika is split into two categories, and this is an important distinction I'm going to do right at the beginning for obvious reasons. So Pika is split into Pika Production and Pika Workshop. So Pika Production are the people that produce, that build experiences that help you engage with worlds of sound. They build artifacts, they build experiences, spaces and objects. It's always better with these sort of things to show you a visual. So quickly I'm going to show you a visual of this is the kind of thing you might expect Pika Production to be up to on any given day. This is something called Skyvane. It's a sculpture which you can sit around and experience that has sensors that are receptive to atmospheric pressure, to moisture, to temperature, and it changes a composition, an ongoing rolling composition based on the weather. And so that's Skyvane. Pika Workshop is what I lead. So today I'm going to be talking to you about Pika Workshop. The reason I'm making that important distinction at the very beginning is that if you have any questions at the end about the coding languages we used or how many things we soldered, I don't know what questions you'd ask about Pika Production, but I can't answer those questions, basically. So my expertise is in creative facilitation, in designing, in researching and developing the products that Pika Production build. So the kind of thing I might do, this is me sampling a cellist at the London Symphony Orchestra with about 400 school children in an afternoon. This is me making instruments out of scrap materials and then remixing them in real time with my colleague Gary Martin. As part of a live interactive performance. So that is Pika Workshop. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go a little bit through what our experience and our journey as a company was. Firstly, just because I'm quite proud and excited about the stuff that we've done. So I'd like to just share some of our work with you. And secondly, hopefully not get too excited and waffly that I don't give you some hopefully useful points and reflections on what the best practices might be in a co-design process. So when we started in schools. This is the first bombshell of this talk, is that once upon a time schools had actual money, and so we used some of that money to go in and deliver workshops. And the idea behind all of our workshops is that they are very much pinned down by co-design and participatory design. So coming alongside the participants, not talking down to them, not looking down on them, not underestimating them, and kind of like going alongside them and kind of developing experiences, developing products with them. So we spent quite a few years in schools, kind of like scoping this out. Around 2015-16, there was a Arts Council Wales scheme called Lead Creative Schools, which essentially paired artists with classes. And gave the opportunity for artists to go in, share their expertise, and also kind of explore how that might be actually applied into the curriculum. And this was an interesting thing for us. This was a really interesting place for me to start, because one of the key phrases around that time was the concept of pupil voice. The idea that the voice of the learner in the classroom, of the people in the classroom, was a really important thing. Obviously, this is something that has already been growing for many, many years, but this is the point where it's starting to get put into government policy, get assessed more formally. And so that kind of asked the question for us, where that balance is between the agency of the child, so the ability of the child and the young person to participate in what would be seen as quite grown-up things, and to break down those power structures of teacher and pupil that were had been so ingrained for so many years, but also to kind of like at some point acknowledge that we might also be able to bring something, that we could be in the class and bring our expertise as well, and kind of where that balance was. And so we spent many years doing this, and I think the thing that's going to go through this entire talk really is that idea, is that balance of not underestimating, be acknowledging that whenever you're doing a co-design process, not going in up here and like you're kind of like getting this like feedback and then you're kind of bringing it back to your tower to analyze, that you are alongside people that you're designing. Going into a school doesn't mean that you're going to get less, but also the idea that you need to be confident and clear in what you're doing. So I'm going to give an example that we did. I said, when Martin introduced me, he said that I'm going to do examples of not so successful projects. I think I'll put a disclaimer here that none of these projects I'm going to talk about, we think were bad. If you want the real gossip, talk to me afterwards. I'm not going to out anyone. I'm not going to out anyone here. But this is a project that we did at a primary school in Wales. We got linked with them as sound artists, and we got asked the question: can creative sound design help a Year 1-2 class develop a comfort around tricky words? So they had a list of 100 tricky words, and the idea is to use sound in some way to help them feel more comfortable and more able to tackle tricky words. And so we looked at the list, and we kind of thought, well, we can. The teacher will have already done a certain amount of going through the visuals, going through the text, and how you sound them out. We're sound artists. Let's look at what these words might sound like. So we developed sounds with the learners. We went around and we captured sounds from the environment that represented more abstract words. So we did sort of, for example, what does when sound like? What does there sound like? And also, what does things like night and day and love and hope sound like? Which, again, is a really interesting thing, because what I found working with children is that they have far fewer assumptions about what they can and can't do off the bat. A lot of people have these kind of hierarchical ideas of intellect or ability, and maybe look at something abstract like that and think, well, that's quite a grown-up thing to do. But actually what we found is there are just some people that are very naturally good at embracing those sort of things. And so that was a big bit of learning for me, is to just go into a project expecting, or rather not expecting people to just immediately not be able to do something. So yeah, that was great. We did create a bank of sounds for all of these words. And then at that point, I would say we were finished. We did that. We had achieved our goal. We had created something. They felt comfortable with their words. We designed it alongside them. That should have been it. This was early days, so what I thought is that, hey, these words don't have anywhere to live. And so we thought, maybe there's something we can do about that. Maybe we could write a story. So we facilitated 2 or 3 sessions which pooled ideas from the class about a story that could contain all of their tricky words, and which I then took away, and I wrote that story into a book. And we thought, well, maybe we can publish this book. Maybe we can publish this book. And as I was writing it out, I thought, what kind of font can we use to write this book in? And so I thought, well, I guess what we could do is we could get all of the learners to write a letter each, and then I can turn that into a font. Obviously, way out of my depth at this point. And also, this is also one of those stories that's far less impressive now in the age of AI. But this was before the age of background removal with AI. And so there was a point where I was in an Airbnb at about sort of 11 o'clock at night on another project, painstakingly removing the background on a load of children's drawings, and then Googling the term how to make a font. And then using that font to develop our book. So we'd done all that. It was stressful. It was intense. It wasn't a bad project. It was a very successful project, and everyone was happy. But what we had done is we hadn't stuck entirely to what we knew we were good at. We hadn't kind of stayed true to sort of our expertise. And also, some would argue that we were slightly a lot of what we did was unnecessary. And in terms of it being sustainable as a process, which is what we want it to be, it just wasn't viable. And so I think, the lesson from this is that if you're going into a co-design process of any sort, being confident and being clear on what your role is incredibly important. It sounds like a very simple message, but it's something we came up against time and time again, and we learned from. And then, yeah, we had a very good few years developing tools, developing products, and developing little processes with young people from that learning, but all part of quite small projects. These were all sort of like a couple of months a pop, some alongside each other. And as we were doing this, this is kind of 2015, 16, this started, and as we were going along, we had in our minds, what would a bigger version of this look like? So we had this kind of learning that we got from these small school projects. We thought, what would a bigger version of this look like? Also, we've been asked a lot about app development. Anyone working in creative tech around that time, I guarantee will have been asked, can you build us an app, with very little understanding about how much that costs, how many resources that takes, and how much time it takes. So we did, we did have the normal reactions to that, but then alongside that we thought, well, actually, could we do this? Could we develop a big thing with a group of young people? Could we do a year-long co-design process where we challenged young people to build a fit-for-market tool? So that was the crucial thing for us, is that, rather than just being process-driven and developing sort of a prototype at the end, could we actually do the whole thing from the design, the development, the creation, and then the release? And so from that came the Pika hack. And so this is a project that we launched in 2016. And yeah, the idea was just that, is to build initially an app with a group of young people. So I'm going to talk you through a little bit of what this project was. We started with just that question. So can we develop a tool with a group of young people? So, looking at things like user journey, looking at things like character profile, who would be using the tool, and then a little bit looking into coding. We talked about being the experts in the room, but we didn't want to just entirely gatekeep that. So we did something called Coded Classroom with them, that I did an if that then statements. I can't do the worm. That's something I discovered on that project. Gary Martin can do a chicken dance, though. So, so we did a lot of these kind of little workshops with them, developing an entire product from start to finish. The first year was this, Splotch. This is what we came up with. This was a game for iPad, and it was entirely designed by young people. And I think this goes back to my point about being clear about what your expertise is. What we did here in the Spirit of Pupil Voice is we got them to design absolutely everything. So the levels were designed by them, the characters were designed by them, what it was going to be was designed by them, absolutely everything. We didn't veto a lot in this project. We didn't say no a lot in this project. And what it ended up as, I'm careful when I talk about this, because some people would look at this and think it's great. It's a kind of aesthetic, that kind of child-made aesthetic that some people really, really like. But I think what we got from this is that while it was fun, it wasn't really representative of a true production process. We were kind of saying, we're going to go in and we're going to do a production process with young people. But what we've kind of done is not really given them a true taste of what that was, by not vetoing stuff and by not being an expert in the room. We'd not necessarily given them the best chance of developing something of the best quality. So to remedy that, we had the idea to bring in an actual client to hold us accountable. So the idea then would be that we would be the facilitators of the project. The young people in schools, so we had 6 primary schools each year, would be the developers and the creators and the launchers. But then the third party then would be a client that would give us a brief and a question that we had to answer. So the next year we had this. This is an acrux produced by an instrument inventor called Victor Gamma. And he just basically wanted a digital version of this. He was aware that it was quite a physical, confined to one space kind of thing, and he wanted a digital version of this instrument. And on this project, it was really important for us to kind of get behind the idea of you can still be a team if you're then kind of looking at only one idea being put forward. And actually, children are quite good at that, and young people are quite good at that. You know, that as long as you make sure everyone's heard and everyone's listened to, the idea of sitting around in a circle and chatting about what's good, what works in this instance, what doesn't work in this instance, is actually something that young people, I find, are really, really on board with. And so we didn't shy away from that from now on. You know, we as I said, made sure everyone was listened to, but we did kind of have much more of a, let's make this more democratic. Let's talk and vote on what's the best thing for the project. Let's all be involved, but let's be involved in different ways. And so this is us developing our digital tool, the Acrux Seasons, which we launched at the Riverfront. Then the following 2 years really ramped up again. So we had that learning of not underestimating the young people. So we thought, how far can we take that? Like, we want to prove this. This is our thing that we say all the time. We say, don't underestimate the young people. Okay? So how far can we take that? How crazy can we get with this? And so the answer was, the third year we got Tate as our client, and the fourth year we ended up working with Shakespeare's Globe as our client, which was a massive ramp up and also made us really put our money where our mouth is in terms of not underestimating the young people, because now we had a situation where we were making a collaging app and we were having decisions made by year 6 pupils in a primary school in Wales that were triggering conversations between the Tate in London and the estate of Roy Lichtenstein. And so we kind of, that was a point for us where we thought, no, now we really need to double down on this. You know, we really need to make sure that we are sure that these young people can do anything. You know, we can provide a certain thing in this project, but we really need to make sure that we are lifting them up as well. And so this was our collaging product. Yeah, I mean, I'll put that back. So I think, you know, it's all very well saying these kind of like these things about not underestimating them, but we also want to meet young people where they are. So as part of this project, you know, there's a lot of elitism and a lot of exclusivity around art too. So we did get them permanent marking on paintings that they thought were Tate paintings. We actually started the entire project by bringing in paintings and showing them off and saying that we're working with Tate, and then getting out permanent markers and just like scrawling on them and making little amendments to them. And the teacher's face is just kind of going, what? They were just paintings that our head of production, Miles, had got out of a skip somewhere. So it was okay. And then also, I mean, I just include this slide because I just think it's funny. But we did a lot of this too. We did a lot of turning Tate, like proper and sort of quite formal Tate pictures into memes. So that was kind of a fun day. Which they really enjoyed. And it kind of like, it kind of broke down that kind of idea of art and everything else being kind of this aloof, unattainable, inaccessible thing, and that they could engage with it too. Yeah, so this is some of the outputs from the tool that we made. And then finally, Shakespeare's Globe. So yeah, this was the last project in this iteration. And yeah, this was a culmination of all our learning. You know, every year we try to learn something from these things. The same message was existent throughout. I do think that I've got one message from this particular project, though, is that you can have all the learning in the world. You still have to be aware of your own abilities as a small company. So obviously, Shakespeare's Globe, massive organisation. We had really nailed our facilitation down by that point. We'd really got that production process of spending the entire first term with the primary schools, first of all, immersing them into all of the tools available and immersing them into, in this case, the subject Shakespeare. The second term, exploring what was possible. And then the third term, looking at what we were going to create. And off the back of that, we had a big pile of post-it notes categorized into different things, you know, to user character profiles, user journey, product design, everything. we took them up to London as representatives. We thought that was a really great way to represent the learners, take them actually up to London, met with the entire Shakespeare's Globe team, and spent the entire day moving the post-it notes around and looking like how can we best represent the young people here, and how can we make the best possible product that's a result of their work. And we came away from that day with the idea of making a language inventor. And again, another disclaimer that this is much less impressive in the days of AI, because I literally did this the other day on ChatGPT, and it was really depressing. But yeah, this is before AI, and we came away from that meeting thinking that was incredible, like that we really represented the young people. We really kind of like had a good grasp on what was and wasn't possible. But then I have a distinct memory of sitting in a meeting room in University of South Wales and thinking, well, now what we have to do is take every single word in the English language, break it apart into different bits, and then allow people to merge them together, and then also spew out a definition from that. And I thought, how is this even possible? I mean, we found workarounds and we did it, but that was us with a really good plan. That was us with 4 years learning. That was us with a really good facilitation plan, and it worked because of that. But it was tight. it was a difficult thing, and that idea of being confident in your ability as an expert, but also realistic about what's possible, I think is a really difficult balance, but a really important one as well. So that's the hack. I'm gonna. One of the last things I want to show you is something that there's a lot here. I'm aware of that. If you have any more questions about any of these specific things, obviously we've got questions at the end, and I'm happy to stay for a bit after and chat too. But one thing that I haven't talked about yet is peak a loop. And this basically has been present for our entire journey as a company, and it's a found sound remix tool that has been developed, that was released in 2012, and has been developed alongside all this learning. So it stayed with us. We keep doing workshops with it. We keep developing it. It was built off a group of young people who were at danger of not attending school, and were also kind of very lacking in confidence in using creative tech and engaging with music. And so we wanted to create a tool that was not like any other conventional scary music tool. So this is what we ended up building. So this isn't a blank screen. This is Peak a Loop. I always do this because it's one of those things where I could spend 10, 15 minutes talking to you about it and not get any closer to it, whereas just showing you, I'm hoping you'll get a bit more of a grasp. And so what you can do is you can just press the screen and record a sound, and it immediately just captures a little sound here, and it bends it into this little looplet, this little shape. What I love about this is that it's also visual. I think the thing with sound is that when you talk about sound, I talked right at the beginning about sound being exclusive and elitist. I think for that to be entirely true, you also have to be hand in hand with other forms. And I love that this is visual. We've actually had hearing impaired students create visuals with these waveforms, which I really love, and actually create objects and shapes by recording sounds and using it that way. But then you could just do lots of things with these shapes. So you can hold the sound to play it. Just going to turn on my speaker. Cool. And record a sound. So you can hold the sound. And record a sound, and it immediately just captures. And you can take 2 fingers and tap it. And record a sound. And you can make the loop link float. And you can take 2 fingers and drag it down. And drag it up. You can scrub it. And then you can kind of add things as well. You can, where am I? Yes. So I just scrunched a Coke can, and I just put a glass of water down. Can make that a bit quieter by pinching it small. I'm going to scrub that a bit as well, like a record. And I'll throw it off the screen and delete it because I'm getting a bit bored of that sound. I can also change the frequency filter by dragging it up and down. And you won't hear this in the room, but you can also change a pan on the headphones by going left and right. I'll do that. So that's peak a loop. Hopefully that's a little bit more. Hopefully now you're a little bit aware about what that is. And that's been our flagship tool at Peak Workshop. That's what we've worked with. We've done an incredible amount with that. We've done science fairs, we've done Welsh folk festivals, we've done maths projects in schools, we've done storytelling, we've done endless things with this, all that came from one problem, from one group of people, about not feeling comfortable with music and sound tools and not feeling comfortable with tech. And so that being like quite a visual interface, quite a simple interface. And the message from this is, I've talked a lot about iterating through different projects. This is an example of iterating through one thing, through one project. And for that, it kind of requires you to, at some point, just release something. I talked at the beginning about being kind of like universally accessible, about being alongside as many people as possible, as inclusive as possible. And while that is incredibly important, you are at some point going to have to just put something out in the world and get the feedback. And the most important thing about that is that you're still listening when you release. If you release something, if you do something and then that's it, that's where it becomes slightly more problematic. But what we've done with this is we released it. We kind of then kept on doing as many things with as many different people, as many different groups as we could. And we just kept listening and we kept evaluating and we kept sort of putting in time and energy towards kind of big updates and small updates as well. And so it looks very different to how it did when it launched. But yeah, it's kind of an example of one of the key ways that we work as a company. So we have these projects which we've learned from and developed, but we also have this tool, which is something that has just been our mainstay throughout, but has changed the more we learn. So I'm just going to finish by saying where we are now. And to do that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the work that we've done with Watershed. And this is the Expression Orchestra. Now, everything I've talked about up to this point is talking about coming up alongside the end user, working in a co-design philosophy, building things with the groups that they're designed for. With the Expression Orchestra, this was an AI Sandbox project run by Watershed. And what we really wanted to do here was ask the question, can we go right back to square one? Because by the time you get into a room with, a single group of people, you're never going to get an entire representation of that group of people. You can't have one room that's representative of everyone. And so what we wanted to do was to kind of take one step back again and think, can we build a musical experience that is built entirely from an access-first philosophy? So this is the Expression Orchestra. We built this set of instruments. These are sort of prototype instruments. This is roll here. This is something you can roll along the ground, and it makes noise depending on how you roll it. And this is press, which is a pressure pad, and changes depending on how you interact and move on that pressure pad. We also had throw, and so we built these with the acknowledgement that quite often with music, there's a lot of retrofitting for accessibility, and we wanted to see if there was a way of developing a philosophy by which we could build something completely different and completely new, a room that someone could come into, and no matter where they were, they could feel comfortable and able to engage. I'm going to direct you somewhere now, because we ended up with this. This is Access First Design. The great thing about the Watershed project is that we could be a lot more, we could put a lot more resources into this kind of more academic angle to a project. So yeah, as I said, like we've done a lot of going into a room and going like, well, I'll workshop this. We put our tools into old people's homes, and we put our tools into every kind of school you could imagine. But even then, we were aware that that's still quite reductive. You know, that's still quite a reductive way of doing something. You can't go into an old people's home, for example, do a few sessions and kind of go, well, now we've ticked off that group. And so this was a paper, and this is an initial paper that we published that we intend on using from now on. You can read this at your leisure. I think there's going to be a link in the chat for people online as well. This was done by our colleague Gary Martin, and we just wanted to lay out a manifesto so that from now on, when we're going into projects, we're not only going in with the understanding that we'll listen to the people in the room, but that we'll have a much more holistic manifesto about how people and we should approach an Access First Design project. I'm going to leave that one there. I believe that I'm hoping that at some point Gary Martin is going to come in and do an entire hour on Access First Design. I mean, I'm not throwing him under the bus there. I hope not. But yeah, I think the main thing to say about this is it's a work in progress. It was something we were very fortunate to be able to explore with Watershed through this project. But it is a work in progress, so we're open to listening to people about what their thoughts are on this. And we're also kind of trying to be humble about it and know that we're not going to get everything right the first time. But that's us. So that's Pika. I'm now just going to leave it there and ask if you've got any questions.
Thank you very much, Greg. And apologies for the technical issues we've been having with BSL. I think Nikki's back with us now, but sorry that she wasn't there for a little bit. Does anyone have any questions?
That's fascinating. That triangle between facilitation and co-production and production values is something that interests me a lot. And what I found most interesting was your comment about a client and what a difference it makes, having someone with expectations.
Yes. Yes. I mean, expectations. It is a very different world, and I think how we approached that was that we made everything a conversation as well. You know, we our stipulations for those projects. That it wasn't just an email sent to a client and then they said, oh yeah, can you make us that please? And then 6 months later we gave them the product. We had weekly check-ins with the client. We also got them to write out what their brief would be, but then we also got everyone in every class to annotate that brief and send it back to the client to kind of like manage those expectations. And so yeah, having conversations was the key there. Absolutely, you know, it's a crucial part of it, and it's also something that on a lesson plan seems slightly more boring. You know, like when the temptation as a creative facilitator is to go like, oh, we'll do this like big glittery thing over here, and we'll do this big dancing thing over here, and whereas actually like projects like this require big circle, you know, move all the tables out of the way, circle of chairs, let's chat about what our expectations are, let's voice all our concerns, and yeah. It's essential for sure, yeah. And it's interesting doing it with those kind of people. Yeah, thanks for that.
Anything else?
Hi, Greg.
Hi.
Is the Sky Vane a permanent installation somewhere? How and where would someone see it in action?
Good question. Yes, no, it's not a permanent installation. It was permanently installed at Tredegar House in Newport. The ambition is for it to be a permanent thing, but it is also movable. So we currently have one Sky Vane, and yeah, that's been exhibited in various different places. It's also managed by Pika, so the production team sort of stay there and.
Is there a website where we can trace?
Yes. So I'll put these links in the chat and everything. But it's pika.wales is the.
Thank you.
It's very simple. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. That was really interesting. I might have to chat to you afterwards a little bit. This is very close to my practice. But I wondered if you had any issues or discoveries around fall-off points with co-design, points where, for reasons of practicality or for ethical reasons, it stops becoming useful or appropriate to fully integrate your co-designing participants into a process, or whether as the artistic facilitator or the practitioner, there comes a point where you have to either design in a break or you have reached a cliff edge and you've had to adapt your process.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I mean, I think I'll sort of answer that in two parts, because obviously I've talked a lot about working with young people. The luxury of the hack project that we ran is that everyone knew what they were going in for at the beginning. So the client knew we weren't approaching the client, they didn't pay us money to develop a product. They knew they were part of a creative project with schools. And so in that sense, I think we could be a lot more easy with how we kind of navigated those cutoff points. Because first of all, we can just chat about it and say, this is possible, this isn't possible. And you can be quite clear about what those reasons are. But also, that the stakes, you want the stakes to kind of be real, but also in terms of the real world stakes, they are lower. I think in terms of like the expression orchestra, we did apply that to expression orchestra. That was a new bit of learning for me personally. So I did the research and development element of creating these musical instruments by taking them into various spaces with various different people. We did quickly become aware that because we already had an idea about what we wanted it to be based on our reading and our learning, there was much more of a push and pull for sure. So I think if you go into a project having any idea what you want it to be, the co-design does prove to be quite a lot different, and it forces you to reevaluate what that process looks like. But with the hack, it was just fairly easy.
Awesome. Can I quickly follow up on that?
Yeah.
That last thing you said about knowing what you want it to be, can you talk a little bit more about that? And because it sounds like that is a really important binary about how you go into the process as a facilitator.
Yes. I think having a team behind it that had, for example, created a visual brand for something, and then having something come out of the co-design process that entirely opposed that visual brand. That would be an example that we had on the Expression Orchestra, where someone would propose something and it goes against something that we kind of pitched. It's never black and white though. It's never just one or the other. There's always chance to sort of have conversations, and it's kind of what I made the point here is that just talking is the best thing. I think we went into the Expression Orchestra with an idea, not an assurance about what we wanted it to be. But even that idea did provide some push and pull, but I think you should never go into something with an assurance of what you want it to be, because otherwise the co-design process is basically meaningless. So, yeah. Thanks.
I think we got one online.
Hey, Greg.
Hi.
Ruth would like to know, could you talk a bit more about to what extent the Access First design is co-produced with disabled people?
Yes. I will say, first of all, we are in early stages of this. And so the Access First design as it stands is a manifesto that we want to use going forwards. And I think I'm going to be careful with how I talk about this, in that I don't want to just kind of tell you all the ways that I think we've done the right thing here. And I just want to kind of more voice a willingness to learn, because that's what the Access First design thing is. It's a want to not just be in the room with different groups of people. And so in the case of disabled people, not just be in the room with these groups, but also kind of do a lot more thinking leading up to those do a lot more listening, because when we go into a room and we, for example, develop a tool like the Expression Orchestra, if we're doing a co-design, we're looking at people using the tool, and then we are then going away and reflecting with our own biases on what might work and what doesn't work. With the Access First design, it was about taking one step back and listening much more holistically to different groups of people, and almost like seeing how they would want to be treated in those research and development spaces, how they would want to give feedback as well, because feedback giving and feedback receiving can also be quite inaccessible and kind of quite difficult in certain situations. And so, yeah, it's just sorry, I'm not giving a lot there, but it's more at this point from the Access First design. It was more of a reflection on the limitations of what we'd be doing up to this point, and a willingness to be as radical as we could with how we do design, co-design going forward. And that's some of the ways that we want to do that. Yeah, and we do start to outline that in the document. But yeah, there's more to come for sure. Yeah, thank you for the question. Thanks, Ruth.
Anybody else? I might ask. You go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
You say you came from a musical background, and a lot of the stuff you've done is musical, but there was also, like, you went into other areas.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
Yes, very, very good question. Yeah, I mean, I think we did start off as a musical company. We've kind of come full circle, basically. We all did the same music-based degree. We got into designing a musical tool, and I think from that, we kind of got into this space of, well, co-design is co-design, like creativity can be applied to lots of different areas. We can do this sort of thing, you know. We've now come full circle now, and starting with Expression Orchestra and a little bit before that, we now market ourselves as a sound-based company, and we kind of have a much more strict thing of like, we do sound things, you know, we're sound artists. You know, we have expertise in sort of facilitation. You know, I consider myself sort of a creative facilitator, and I can do that in various different spheres. But yeah, it's kind of what I said in the talk about being realistic about what you can and can't do. And yeah, there have been projects where we have, been aware that we're slightly outside the scope of what of what we're able to do, and also provide value. You know, and it's what I said about being confident as well. I think there were definitely times where we thought, if we go in and do an entire, so say it's a 12-day project, and all of those 12 days are just capturing sounds and exploring the world of sound. In the early days, I think maybe there's like a lack of confidence in that. We saw other people doing exactly that and them being very successful, you know, going in and doing a certain thing and spending a focused amount of time producing something. So for us, it was just a journey, a personal journey. For me, it was a personal journey of developing that confidence that it was enough to just lean on your actual expertise and kind of do, you can do a 12-day project, you can do a whole year project of sound design, and we've since done that, and I've since done that, and kind of really delving deep into that art form. Yeah, so it's definitely a learning thing, but now we're at that point where we are now. Sound, yeah.
I might squeeze in my question now.
Cool.
So you talked a bit about the sort of scoping issues and like things that are possible with the small team that you have, which I think is a hugely important part of any kind of design process. But how did you go about communicating that kind of issue with the young people that you were working with, especially when you're like trying to inspire people that anything is possible? But that might not actually be true.
It's a really important point. It's another balance, because what you do need to be as a company in this kind of environment, in this sort of sphere, is you need to kind of be radical, right? You know, you need to kind of think, how far can we stretch this? Which is what I said about the hack. You know, how far can we kind of push this idea? So yeah, there is an absolute balance there. You know, you don't want to be going like, you can't do this. I think, but there is also an honesty to saying, you know, just exactly that. You know, there is an honesty when you bring people. It seems almost too simple a point to make, but when you're bringing a class, for example, I think the conventional thing in a class of kids is for a teacher to say, you can't do that. And then they ask why. And the old school phrase would be, because I said so. But I think we found there was a lot of power in just kind of outlining basically why we couldn't do something. Which again, seems like a simple thing to say, but I think it is actually an underused thing, kind of just going, we can't do this because, you know, this is going to take £100,000 and 3 years, you know, for these reasons, you know, so can we explore a different way of doing that? Yeah, it is definitely a balance though. It is a really kind of important one, you know, like with my Shakespeare's Globe thing, I was careful at the end there to not say, we shouldn't have done a language inventor because that was just crazy and it might not have worked, because we needed to do something radical, and yeah, and it kind of worked out. But yeah, just telling people why is quite often enough. Yeah.
Any last questions? Vic.
Hi, Greg. Thanks.
Hi.
It's really great talk. I just wondered if you could maybe share some of your tactics for keeping 30 young people engaged in a co-production process.
Yes. Firstly, I think being aware of what the space is. We found that when we go into a school, it's not just the systemic teacher-pupil relationship that's evident. It's also, I say this now, this is exactly what this situation is, but chairs facing the front and person talking at the class. We've done a lot of imagining the space differently. So at the moment we get into a room, we change the room. So we move the tables out of the way. We don't shy away from kind of putting a bit of energy into that as well. It might seem like quite a clunky thing to do, but we might start the day like this, and then we might go, right, now can everyone move the tables to the side? And we get into a circle. And so like reimagining that space constantly has actually been really powerful. Being also aware of the attention span as well. Particularly, you know, I mean, like it's always been the case, attention span and kind of limiting activities to 20 minutes is what we tend to do. So 20-minute activities, a little introduction, 20 minutes, and then a chance to share as well. Sharing has also been a powerful thing. So if we allow time, and it's another thing that's sometimes overlooked in terms of time and planning of sessions, if the participants know that they're going to be sharing something that they've been doing and kind of like celebrating and being proud of what they're doing at the end, that's kind of a weirdly powerful thing as well. We also play music a lot as well. We also play music a lot in the sessions. That was magic to me when I first did it. We tried loads of different ways of getting people's attention, but the most powerful thing I've ever done is put music on while they're doing the activity, and the moment you stop the music, everyone just stops. It's amazing. That's the power of sound, right? You know? That is genuinely.
That's a really good tip.
Yeah. That's all I got for now.
Any last quick questions for Greg before we finish? In that case, we'll say thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you.
All right, before you go, if you want to stick around and hot desk with us today or find out more about what we do, then please come find one of the studio team. We'll be happy to help. Studio team, give us a wave. Loads of us here today. If you're watching online, drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you again next time.